Good evening and welcome to Lockdown Learning. My name is Bren Carlil and I'm the Director of Public Affairs at the Zionist Federation of Australia. Tonight we are thrilled to host Kalman Samuels, founder of Shalva. Kalman was raised in Canada but moved to Israel midway through university. After a short stint on a kibbutz, he enrolled in a yeshiva, which was, to put it mildly, a surprising move to his non-observant family. In 1973, Kalman married Malki and the couple took up residence in Jerusalem. In 1977, their second son, Yossi, at the time 11 years old, was injured by a faulty vaccination and was rendered blind, deaf, and acutely hyperactive. Kalman and Malki eventually created Shalva to help the parents of other special needs kids. We'll be hearing more about the motivations behind, the forming of Shalva a little bit later on, so I don't want to give too much away now. But Shalva became Israel's and then the world's largest disability support center of its kind. It provides a range of therapies, inclusive educational frameworks, recreational activities, vocational training, and respite and family support, and all free. Tonight, Kalman will be speaking with Keren Zelwer. Keren is a mother of three, the youngest being a daughter with special needs. Keren is a speech pathologist and a disability advocate. She's spoken about disability inclusion for many organizations, including Flying Fox, Friendship Circle, B'nai Akiva, Mizrahi, Jewish Care, and so we are thrilled that we have Keren with us tonight. However, before I hand the conversation over to Keren, I want to introduce Gusti Yehoshua Braverman. Gusti is the head of the Department of Diaspora Affairs at the World Zionist Organization. And previous to this role, she served as the Associate Director of the Israel Movement for Reform and Progressive Judaism. We are speaking with Kalman tonight due to the efforts of Gusti and her team. And I believe that Gusti will be having a few words with us about the other activities that her department is doing. So, Gusti.
Shalom, good evening. For us, it's good afternoon. And I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to be among friends. You know, I have a very tight relationship with the Jewish community of Australia, and I'm thrilled to cooperate with you. This program that we present to you tonight is part of a wider program that we started when the coronavirus was something that nobody knew even how it will affect the world. We moved to this Zoom platform with the idea of staying in contact with other people, with our Jewish community around the world. Since then, we had 500,000 people watching our variety of programs that actually, as we do along the year, we try to bring and engage more people with the state of Israel, that to present Israel in ways that maybe, I assume, that are not exposed, people are not exposed through the media. So for this month of Elul, we started thinking about what to do. It's the Chodesh of Slichot, asking for forgiveness. And it was very clear to me that this is a month that we need to, especially this year, to take a moment and to look into ourselves, into our communities, and think about what we want to repair. And we went from there to Tikkun Olam. What does it mean, Tikkun Olam? Tikkun Olam, it's a value in our Jewish life, identity, and it should have a meaning. So we decided to devote Chodesh Elul to Tikkun Olam. Ki Mitzion Tetzeh Torah is not only about the Startup Nation, talking about the marvelous achievement that we have in technology, in high tech, and so on, but also about Tikkun Olam. And since I was exposed to the tremendous and inspiring work that Shalva has been doing for years, I felt that this is something that we want to present the world, and it's a source of inspiration. And meeting Shalva and Rabbi Samuels, and you know, you have to be there in order to understand what we went through while visiting this spot. And I hope and pray that this coming year you will have the ability to return to Israel and take a time and go meet Shalva I promise it will not leave you the same person as you were before coming there. So it's a privilege, and thank you. And as I say, you know, it's about us. And if one of you will decide to do something special, even small thing to repair the world, it will be our benefit. So I want to wish all of us a happy, healthy, and with more actions of repairing the world, that it will be in the light of the vision of Theodor Herzl to create an exemplary society. So enjoy the evening. I'm sure that you will be inspired. And I'm sorry that I have to leave because I have other things to do. You know, it's midtime in Israel. And so Shana Tova and Shavua Tov. Enjoy.
Thank you, Gusti. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, Kalman, welcome. I'm very excited to be speaking to you tonight, especially as the parent of a child with special needs. I've been sent the clips of the Shalva band over and over by friends, and they've always moved me. But I know that Shalva is much greater than just the Shalva band, which has come to fame. So I'd like to go back to the beginning, and let's start talking about Yossi and what happened that brought about Shalva.
If I can go a little bit, first of all, it's wonderful to be with you, and I thank you for this opportunity. If I can take it back a little bit further so that we can understand Yossi a little bit better, let me briefly share that I was born in Vancouver, Canada, a child of the 60s, totally secular, very Jewish, but completely non-religious, and with Zionistic views in the family. And at the age of 18, after 1 year of university, where I had both basketball and academic scholarships and somewhat of a bright future there, I decided to study in France, and I was on my way. My mother asked me to visit Israel en route, and I said, sorry, Mom, but Israel's an apartheid state and I can't visit. This was in 1970. People think I'm mistaken, but that was the line on the university campus way back then. Naturally, my mom had her way. I visited Israel, did what everybody does when they get here, slept on the beach, went to kibbutzim, etc., had a wonderful time. And I was deeply touched by what I saw and what I felt. And I decided that I have to figure this out. So I pushed off my trip to France, thinking I would push it off for 6 weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, I needed more time. By the end of the summer, my father, who was a successful lawyer in Vancouver, was having fits that his bright little son, Kerry, which is still on my passport, was falling out of line and was going to sit and learn in what they call a yeshiva to further his Jewish studies. So I did that, and after another year realized that this is what I wanted to do, and I thought to be an academic in the religious world. Ultimately, en route, I married my wife, Malki, and we began having our family, and we had a beautiful daughter, and we had a beautiful son. His name was Yossi. And at the age of 11 months, Malki took Yossi to the local public health center to receive one of his routine vaccinations. Unbeknownst to the public, certainly unbeknownst to us, the Ministry of Health was having a severe problem with several batches of vaccine. For a 6-month period, Yossi received his towards the end of that 6-month period before they brought in a new one. And he, like many others, was injured, and he became blind, deaf, and extremely hyperactive.
So Yossi was born healthy? Yossi was born healthy.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yossi was born healthy?
Yossi was born a prince. He was healthy. All his milestones were healthy. His milestones were measured minutes before he got the vaccination in the public health center. So yes, Yossi was a beautiful, healthy baby. And it wasn't Yossi so much as it was a general problem that was, you know, government, let us say, significant problems in the medical field at that time. So clearly our lives got flipped on its head. Suddenly we had a child who couldn't hear, couldn't see. His walking was awkward. And to make things worse, we couldn't get medical information. We didn't know why, but doctors would not talk to us, as they wouldn't talk to others in a similar situation. And obviously today, in today's world with internet, no one could have done that. But in those days, there was no internet. And if you wanted to close things down, you could keep them quiet. So we went after a year to New York looking for medical help. We realized very quickly that doctors were talking to us. We stayed. We enrolled Yossi in what is considered the best school for the blind in America, 59th and Lexington, in the middle of Manhattan. We set up shop in Brooklyn. I went into the computer field, and that was that. And on a number of occasions, usually former teachers of my wife or rabbis' wives would be in New York and Brooklyn for their personal reasons and would take the time to visit poor Malki with her difficult situation. And almost invariably, at the end of the conversation, they would say something to the effect that, Malki, it's very nice that you want to keep this child at home, but is it fair to your husband? Is it fair to your other children? Because other children were born. And you should consider getting him out of this family setting. And at night,
that must have been quite a difficult thing to hear from someone. Sorry, Kalman, can I just ask you, some people are finding it difficult to hear you. So if you could speak a little bit louder.
My pleasure. When I'm speaking too loud, just let me know.
Okay.
Should I go over the whole thing, or can we continue now?
That's okay.
Okay. So yes, it was not only difficult to hear, but after one very well-known Rebbitzin, a rabbi's wife who came from Jerusalem, said this to Malki, she cried at night and said, God, I'm never taking Yossi out of the house. And if this is a gift that you gave me, and by the way, she told that woman, when she said that, she said, Rebbitzin, she says, you know how much I respect you, but you do have one problem. And that problem is you don't have any faith. That's like saying to Bill Gates, you're broke. What else did this woman have?
Yeah.
But Malki said, what are you expecting me to do? Who gave me this child? If you're not God, which part of my arm or my leg should I cut off and give away? This is part of me. And that night she cried and she said, God, I'm obviously never taking Yossi out of the home, but if you ever decide to help my Yossi, I'm going to dedicate my life to helping other mothers with their similar situations. Years went by. We went back to Israel a few years later. I continued in the computer field. We enrolled Yossi in the deaf school. And at the age of 8, miracle of miracles, he looked like a 5-year-old, and he had one palm, a deaf teacher of the deaf who was deaf herself, placed one palm on the table. The other palm, she spelled with Hebrew symbols for the deaf, and that was a shin, a vav, lamed, chet, nun, which spells the word shulchan, or table. And for days on end, she did this. And at one point, little Yossi smiled from ear to ear, and she had the sense to understand that this was his Helen Keller moment. This was the moment that he understood miraculously the concept of communication, that which she was spelling in the palm of his hand was in fact the object he was touching. She went ballistic. We had no idea what she was talking about. She started screaming in her deaf intonation, he's got it, he's got it. And I was worried, what the heck did he do now? What did he take? And she explained, no, he's got it conceptually. His life has forever changed. And it was a very emotional.
And did that make a huge difference to his life? Was that the light bulb moment that you'd hoped that it had been?
That was the 180-degree change from a frustrated child to a child who was now intense on learning everything he can and saying to everybody, this was the sign for what's this. So this is a table, this is a chair, this is whatever it might be, the names of people. He learned to spell with the 22 letters, and he could spell anything he wants. On the basis of her work, an extraordinary speech therapist stepped in and said she's going to teach him how to speak Hebrew synthetically. And everybody said it can't be done. 2 years later, Yossi spoke Hebrew synthetically. So now you had a young man, young child, 8 years old, who we could speak to very quickly in the palm of his hand, spelling things out, and he could talk back, somewhat deliberately, but he could talk, and it was with his little bit of an accent, you could understand it. So
So Kalman, I imagine now this was the payback time. So your wife had a conversation with God and said that if something amazing, miraculous happened, what was she going to do?
She sat me down in our little apartment and said, it's payback time and I need your help. And I tried to sort of squeeze my way out of it, that what did I know about these things? And I have a full-time job in computers and 6 kids, one of whom is Yossi. But when she started to cry, I said, I'll do everything I can to help you. It took us a number of years, a lot of challenges. And finally, several years later, I was in my hometown, Vancouver, and ran into a friend who had become quite wealthy, shared the dream with him. And he said, you know what, I'm going to help you and your wife get started. And he gave us seed funding to rent an apartment in Jerusalem. And Malki was literally off to the races. She was the cook.
I think I'd like to meet your wife, Malki.
You know what? I
think
would
we need
love
to
you
speak with
to.
her.
She's a bit of a stickler. She loves people, but it's very funny. I get this request all the time. She's like always likes to be beneath the radar. But Keren, when you're in Israel, we'll make that happen.
I'm going to remember that.
Yeah, I'm there. So Malki's, a bit of a bulldozer, and she set it up initially for 6 children, all with cognitive disabilities. And the first program was an after-school program. Her goal was not only therapy, but to enable a family not only to survive, but in her words, to thrive. That she wanted, the first program was after school, where kids came from their special ed settings that the government pays for. And whatever time they came in at a young age, it may have been 1 or 2, a little bit older, 3, 3:30. They stayed till 6. They had a ball. It was a camp experience. There was some therapy, but there was an enormous amount of activity. And at 6 p.m. after a hot meal, Malki drove them home. And that meant that when the child arrived home at 6:30, mommy and daddy had the opportunity to work a whole day. Siblings had the opportunity to come home and do homework with mommy and daddy. So when Junior arrived home, the family was prepared to give that child what he or she needed as well. That's where it started. It exploded. And before the days of internet, people were banging on our door that they have a child, they have a nephew, their neighbor has a child, the family's falling apart, and we must get that child into this program. And I'm proud to say that from day one, we had 2 principles in accepting children. First come, first serve, and no payment. It did not make a difference to us anything about the background of this child. If they were next in line, they were next in line.
That's incredible. And also children of all religions as well, and all backgrounds?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. At first, it was Jews of all natures, of all kinds. They're over time, so Christians, Arabs, and amazingly, everybody got along. What happened is, in terms of the programming, Malki didn't sit still. She created an overnight program of respite, where every night, a unique program that really doesn't exist anywhere else, every night of the week, a different subset of children slept over. What that means is Johnny goes to school Monday morning, doesn't see mommy and daddy till Tuesday night, but in the interim, we've had the opportunity to help him with his independent living skills. He's had a ball. And most importantly, mommy and daddy and any number of siblings have had a weekly break where they can do whatever works for them.
Sounds incredible. And one of these programs was the Shalva Band. How did that start?
The Shalva Band began, music therapy was a critical component from day one. And let me just, before we go into the Shalva Band, just share something that we should share. Shalva continued to grow. We built our own center, completed it in 98, 8 years after we started. And we were there for 18 years. It served us wonderfully, but we had 400 kids waiting in line. The government offered me 7 acres of land in the heart of Jerusalem in order to build a national center. Malki and I felt we had no way of doing this, but we said it wouldn't be a crime to fail, but it would be a crime not to make the effort. It took a decade, and we built probably the largest center in the world for people with disabilities. It's 220,000 square feet. 22,000 square meters on 12 floors with facilities that, you know, semi-Olympic indoor pool, a huge therapy pool, a gym, auditoriums, playgrounds. It's of a class unto its own, with color, and Malki designed the whole thing with obviously top professionals. And one of the programs, and today, of course, we're not serving 6 kids, we're serving 1,000 every day. So one of the programs—
I think you can say that not only did you try, but you didn't fail. I mean, it sounds like—
Never thought about that, but thank you very much. No, I want to say, listen, everyone does his best, but in this case, God seemed to have a plan that from a small program, it's become what it's become around the clock. And actually, it's, you know, it serves all of life. Our programs today serve all of life cycle, from early childhood, from birth, me and my mommy and the mothers, all the way up through preschools, the after school. Today, we have both employment, we have apartments in the community for people. So it's the entire life cycle, and it just continues to grow. Music, to your question, was always a clear need in these programs, whether it was a young man playing a guitar in the early days for half a dozen kids, or today when it's an enormous program. But the band began in a very interesting way. A young man stepped into my office in the old center and said to me that he's a music therapist, he'd like to work for us. And I said, well, that's wonderful, I appreciate that. Well, we have one, thank you. He says, yeah, but I'll do much more. I said, what will you do? He says, I will build a band. And there was something unusual about this man. I said, tell me about yourself. And he told me a story that he was injured in the Duvduvan, as you know, Fauda on television. He was injured in a severe incident and he was in the hospital for over a year. And he decided to go back to his first love, music, and teach it. And I said to the guy, how long is it going to take you to build me a band? So he said, 1 year. I said, Shai, you're hired. Let's go. We'll reassess it in a year. In a year, nothing extraordinary had happened, but this guy was busy at work with the tweezers, pulling this kid and that kid, and slowly putting together a band that played initially in-house, ultimately out of house. Later, it got to the point where they made an international tour, visiting half a dozen countries and many cities, and they had become a very, very professional band. They were noticed by Israel's, basically, I guess you have, I don't know, Australia Has Talent, where it's a music contest. So Israel has a similar program called Rising Star, the winner of which represents the country at Eurovision. So everybody, professionals, amateurs, are all in that, trying to become that representative. Our band auditioned, they began to play, they opened with Here Comes the Sun, and they never looked back. They destroyed the competition, and they never, unlike anybody else, they never lost. They came to the finals, and Eurovision notified the Israeli producers that there must be a full, Saturday night we knew we were playing after Shabbat, but there had to be a full rehearsal on Friday night. And for some of the kids in the band who were religious, that was a clear problem. The band got together and decided we came in as a family, we're leaving as a family. It was headline news in Israel, and then Eurovision turned around and invited them to be guest artists at Eurovision. They sang A Million Dreams, and they blew away all of Europe.
Sorry, so at this point, we're actually going to watch that. So if Bren, if you could play the clip, and I'm sure everyone will be moved by this. Wow, okay. Kalman, you can't watch that and not be emotional.
Listen, I've seen it more than once, and it hits me hard every time.
Same as me. And I have to tell you that there's another clip of Shalva, which we're not showing tonight, which was the audition that they did. And I cried every time I watched that, not just watching the performers, but really I was crying watching you in the audience, because you were crying in the audience.
I was.
And as a parent to a parent, I really felt your emotion there, and it resonated with me as well. So can you just explain to everyone, what did that moment mean for you?
That moment, the victory bow that they took at the end was everything for me. These are kids. There are two blind vocalists. There is the young man on the left who was doing a bit of sign language on the chimes as well. He is an original member of the band from the time he's a young child. He's with Downs. You have another young man on the right with Downs. You have a drummer who has something called Williams syndrome with an enlarged heart that is the sweetest soul, but he's challenged, but he's got music in a way that experts look at him and they can't compete with him with his drumming ability. And the night before, they went on the opening of the competition. I had dinner with them at the Shalva Cafe here in the building. And I said to them, listen, you've already won. You're on the national stage. You have put the world of disabilities into the world of abilities, and you're showing your skills. So whether you win tonight or you don't win tonight, to me, it's already not the issue. You are winners already. But how surprised I was that they just kept rolling through the competition, and then they made it to Eurovision. And when you see the BBC, 10 minutes, BBC is not a great lover of Israel, and 10 minutes after they finished, they had already tweeted. And one of the bandmen sent me a quick note that Kalman, the band is going all over Europe. Over 500,000 people have seen them. I said, like, what are you talking about? You must mean 5,000. He says, no, I mean 500,000. It exploded. People in Europe were talking about this. The impact beyond, the goal of the band was never music. It was important, but the goal of the band, as they stated many times on television, was social impact, making people realize acceptability. The young man on the right, Yair, was at a concert in Eilat several weeks after Eurovision. And Eilat is, as you all know, it's a beautiful beach city, etc. It's not a city known for its great culture at this point. And there was an outdoor show for 10,000 people. And they put up a sort of a dividing wall, a metal kind of, you could see through it, but a wall to just protect the stage. And as they went down from the stage, young kids, 12, 13, 14, 15, were pushing on that wall and screaming, Yair, Tal. They wanted just to touch them. Mm-hmm. For me, that moment said it all, because several months earlier, I do not believe these young people would have had the same kind of sensitivity and wanting to be close with the same children. So they literally changed the way a country views them, and not them per se, but people with disabilities, and people recognize that everybody has his own abilities, everybody has his own value, and that is what made me so proud.
And I guess every parent wants to see their child shine at something. And maybe, for everyone watching that, they saw that everybody can find something that they're good at. I mean, do you think that's why it resonated so much with people? Why do you think it was such a huge success?
With people whose parents, with people with disabilities, I think it's for the reasons you mentioned. And there was tremendous feedback all through the school system in Israel. Classes were putting on, singing songs and imitating the Shalva band with sign language. Mothers wrote me that their child who began in music or in art has now taken it very seriously, and they realize that if they work hard, they also can come to a different level. As for the typical person who may not have a kid with disabilities in the family, I think it was simply, something that moved them to great ends. Your reaction of what you saw in that opening song was repeated countless times to me, that the moment was an emotional moment of young people overcoming challenges and showing that, hey, we're here. And
that they were amazing at it. It wasn't, they were such high caliber. I mean, they won because they were the best.
Absolutely. They said that many times on the show. The judges said people have complained that we're giving the band somewhat of a pass because it's a good gimmick for television. Right. She says, I'm here to there, and they said, I'm here to tell you that quite the opposite. Because of that concern and the network's concern, we have been instructed to be very, very professional without any kind of, feelings in that regard. He says they stand out, as the guy says, because you're so damn good.
Amazing. And so it sounds like, you know, the band and the publicity that they got really had impact on Israeli society and the way people view disability. But I'm sure you're not completely there yet. I mean, I've had my own experiences, and I know of people in Israel who've had experience where they've taken a child with a disability and they've had a negative reaction. Where do you think we can improve, and what sort of things do you think need to be done? And does Shalva play any part in that?
Several things. I want to make clear that in no way do we think that we've solved the problem. What we have done is made people talk about a problem. People are talking about it now in a very different way than they did before the Shalva band came onto the air. We have a lot of work to do. Having said that, I want to point out that from the time I started Shalva 30 years ago till today, the world of disabilities has so clearly changed and improved, also in terms of attitudes and acceptance. And I think we sometimes forget that, and we can't paint it all with a dark brush. It has to be understood that we've come a long ways, but yes, there is such a long ways to go. And those problems of non-acceptance are always going to be with us, I believe. But we have to be proud and push it always forward.
Sure. And can you tell us about the restaurant? Someone's asking about the restaurant that's at Shalva.
Shalva Cafe was set up as a social enterprise where some of the staff, as many of the programs here, have individuals with disabilities working as regular employees there. And we created a cafe, and I must say we had the good fortune to make a decision to bring in probably the best cafe in Jerusalem to manage it and set it up for us. Many of you may know a cafe called Beit Zayit. You know, it's down in the Botanical Garden in Beit Zayit there. And we became partners. They manage it, so it's not Shalva doing something they don't understand. And it has become an enormous success, considered the finest Italian restaurant in the city, probably. And we're very careful with our youngsters with disabilities, both for their dignity and the people who are dining, that yes, there are people working there, but people who dine do not come in. Maybe they come in once to support a nice organization. The next 10 times they come in because of the ambience, because of the food, and that's where the success lies.
I guess it's a little bit like the band, the same kind of concept.
You know what, Shalva is something. Let me tell you a very quick story. I had a friend, an acquaintance who came in from New York, walked in the front door, saw the 3-story atrium, saw the beauty and the cleanliness, and he said to me, Kalman, all this for whom? And I said, Jack, it's a very nice question. Let's take a quick tour and let's sit down in the cafe, have a coffee, and I'll answer your question. So I showed him the facilities and he was in awe. We sat down in the cafe and I said, Jack, you know, I want to answer the question that you asked. I said, I've been in your community in Long Island in New York, and you have a beautiful Jewish community center. She says, of course. I said, I believe like us, you have a semi-Olympic pool. Yes. You have a beautiful auditorium for 350 people. Yes. And if I remember well, you have a beautiful full-size gym as we do. Yes. I said, why do you have all those things? So he looked at me like I'm nuts, and he says to me, it's called quality of life. So I said, Jack, who told you that because a young mother may have had a child she may or may not have been expecting to have a disability, not only in your book does she have to cope with that disability, but she also has to forfeit automatically her claim to quality of life. This center is here to tell you and other people like you that these families are entitled and worthy of the same quality of life as everybody else. He was, of course, taken aback, but that is the message of the center. The medium is the message. People walk in here and say, oh my God, maybe there's something more to this than just having sort of, you know, pity on somebody.
And do you think that, I mean, it's interesting that the largest facility of its kind for people with disabilities is in Israel. Do you think that's just a coincidence, or do you think it's a reflection on the nature of our society?
let me tell you what Nir Barkat said, the former mayor of Jerusalem. He was standing on our terrace on the top floor looking down, and below him he saw the beginning of what's called Route 16, which is the new superhighway coming into Jerusalem. It's tunneled, coming from 4 miles out, and it's now well along. It'll be open in a couple of years, and it will connect Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, the last 4 and 5 miles in a matter of minutes as opposed to traffic. He said it's very interesting that the welcoming face of Jerusalem for 65,000 people entering and seeing Shalva will not be an IDF facility. It won't be a higher education facility. It won't be high tech. It will be the message of the prophets, the message of Isaiah, helping those who are weak and need that help. And I think that expresses it very well. You know, it's, as we say, it seems to be Basher, meant to be, that this center is going to be at the heart of people coming and leaving Jerusalem.
It's a beautiful message. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your book now that's coming out?
I would love to.
Dreams Never Dreamed.
Yes. So over the years, there's a time when a husband can't always bother his wife with his concerns. So I kept a journal, and I used to talk to my journal at the weirdest hours. And over the years, it grew considerably, and I wanted to share not the journal, but the messages in that journal. And the name of the book is Dreams Never Dreamed. And as a secular kid with a successful future in Vancouver, Canada, I certainly never dreamed of living in Israel, of becoming religious, becoming a rabbi, etc. When Yossi was injured, Malki and I could never have dreamed that one day our son would be able to communicate and have a functional life. And when Yossi did have his breakthrough, we could never have dreamed that it would lead to Shalva and what developed out of Shalva. And I think it's best expressed by a meeting I had with 4 American congressmen who visited the old center, and I was hosting them in a small guest room. And I told my secretary, please make sure nobody bothers me for the next 10 minutes. Let me at least have a few quiet moments to share what this place is about. 2 minutes into that conversation, there's a knock on my door, and it's her. I look at her, I say, like, what is this about? I didn't say that. And she says, for God's sakes, look at your email. And I looked at my email, I excused myself, and there was my son Yossi, who 2 days earlier had flown to Thailand with 2 buddies, looking to fulfill one more of his dreams in riding an elephant. And there he was on top of the elephant with these 2 guys, smiling from ear to ear. And I broke down, and I shared briefly the story with them, and I said to them, gentlemen, I have a sense that all of us dream at some point, and we somehow cease to dream. And I said, I think the message of Yossi is someone who can't hear, can't see, can't walk, never ceases to dream. He dreamt of meeting the President of the United States. He was invited by George Bush to meet him. He dreamt of being a wine taster. He's put out several of his own wines that are selling beautifully. He works in a facility where they love him as a regular dude. And he's fulfilling and continues to dream, and incredibly continues to realize his dreams. And I said, I think the message is to us, and I would say to anyone listening, don't let anybody get in the way of your dreams. Just keep dreaming, whether you're young, whether you're moving on a little bit, and may God help us all realize those dreams.
Definitely. I think sometimes when you have a child with a disability, there's a bit of a tension between dreaming and accepting reality. And it sounds like you accepted where you were at, but at the same time had very lofty dreams, which you actually fulfilled and continued.
Well, if I may share the raw facts. When I first got to New York, I did have dreams. I had dreams of my son being able to play sports. I had dreams of my son possibly being a rabbi. And my older sister, who was a well-known psychologist in Canada, was visiting in New York. She came to see us, and she met my son for the first time. He was all of 2.5. And she sat me down and she said, kid brother, listen very carefully. He's not the problem, you are. You're still dreaming that he's going to be this or that. He's not going to be any of that. He has his own journey, and he's got his own life, And you have to understand that it is not yours, it's his. And stop asking him to live your dreams. You have to help him. And if he can do this much, and that's what he can do, you have to learn to take pleasure and understand that that's maybe for somebody else winning the 100-yard dash at the Olympics. And I actually broke down and cried like a baby because I realized how right she was. And, it's one thing to understand the message, but to digest it and put it in your heart and really begin to live it is a lot of work and a lot of years till you sort of come to the point where you say, this is it. And today in support groups for young fathers, I often share that message and tell them, sober up, guys. This is what it is. If you're religious, it's a gift of God. If you're not religious, however you want to look at it, you look at it, but it's yours. Take responsibility. This is part of you, and do everything you can to make that child's journey the best it can be. So yes, there's a very important reality between dreaming, and I see that too sometimes where parents they can't come to reality because they have dreams they don't want to let go of. And so yes, you have to recognize what those challenges are, cope accordingly, but I do think at the same time, always keeping that dream alive.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have personal dreams, and you've also had bigger dreams to help other people, which you've done.
Well, let's put it this way, my wife had bigger dreams. Yes. I got schlepped into it.
Your wife, who I'm meeting when I come to Israel.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Listen, I want to tell you something. In the book, there are photos at the end, and Malki does not appear there. And I said to her, Malki, how can you do that? She says, you'll get by. It's okay. So it's like, she's not there. It's the funniest thing.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just having a look that I've got some questions from people that I'm going to go to. Some people want to know about some of the other programs at Shalva, such as the Mummy and Me and the dental hygiene program and Shirut Luami, some of the things that happen day to day at Shalva.
Yes. So let's start from the Mummy and Me, which is for newborn children and their mothers. Malki one day started crying at home, and I came home from work and I said, what happened? And she told me she can't live with herself because she knows what mothers are going through and the loneliness that they have after birth. And she needs a program for the mothers. And her idea became Me and My Mummy. And what it is every day, Sunday through Thursday in Israel, the weekdays here, 20 mothers come in, and often husbands with them. And the children range in age from 6 weeks to a year and a half is when they graduate. And on the day that they come, they all come one day a week, and they come from all over Israel. And they get 5 different therapies, whether it be speech or physio, swimming in a magnificent therapy pool together, coffee and cake together. And what happens is Mummy realizes, I'm not alone, I have a community. And basically she gets put back on her feet very, very quickly. And what the significance of that is not only Mummy, the significance of that is the family unit. Because if Mummy's not functioning, the family's not going to function very well. So it's critical that we get Mummy up and functioning, more so than Daddy even. And when she gets up on her feet, that family is moving forward. That's Me and My Mummy. Out of that grew daycare programs with tremendous amount of inclusion. All of our programs have inclusion with typical kids as well. And out of that grew preschools, 4 to 6. Then you have the 6 to 21 original program, the after school program. But as opposed to having 5 or 6 kids, it now has 280 kids a day. And then you have the respite center, which used to be 8 kids a day. Today, we have a capacity on a complete floor of 86 beds of magnificent facilities and full of color in this building, the art, etc. The dental center arose, again, I had a dream of helping families with their dental problems. And I thought about dentistry. And a visitor I had, a professor of dentistry from New York, said to me that that's going to be very difficult because you're taking upon yourself liability. That should be done in a dental setting or in a hospital. But he said, what you could do is oral hygiene. And he explained the significance of oral hygiene and the mouth being the gateway to good health, and that children and families with disabilities often are negligent in that area. And before you know it, at the age of 6 or 7, that child with a disability, whereas he could have had a mild dental problem, often needs surgeries in a hospital. So I was very excited. We set it up, and it's been an enormous, enormous success. So much so that people from the United States who are in the field and have seen it have set up a sister program in the United States, which is growing rapidly with tremendous impact on the rights of people with disabilities to oral and dental health. In terms of national service girls and boys, again, we started small. And in Israel, you have an establishment of what's called national service. In Hebrew, it's called Shirut Leumi. And it means that young women after high school, 19 and 20-year-olds, who don't want to go to combat in the army have a right to say, I want to do national service, and I'll do that in a recognized facility, which is often a hospital. In our case, it's Shalva. And today we are one of the largest groups of such volunteers. We have about 75 young people in our center, and we also have 6 young men who are doing their national service. And they are literally the workforce. They learn very quickly how and what to do from our professional staff that enable Shalva to care for so many people. If I had to pay, they're all paid, but if I had to pay a full-blown professional staff for each of these people, this would be absolutely impossible. Because at the end of the day, the government gives me 38% of my $10 million, $20 million budget today.
Well, that's something that a lot of people are asking about, the viewers. So how does the funding work? I guess this is...
The funding works as follows. Nobody pays. That's that's ironclad. We will never let in a paying client before a non-paying client. In our books, everybody's the same. If an individual is wealthy and wants to contribute, by all means, we're not blocking those doors. But it's
you mean
not
a donation, or they pay for the service?
No, no.
No one pays for the service.
Nobody pays for anything. This is I wanted to sleep well at night, and I wanted to know that when I take in a person, it's because he's in line, and not because someone powerful is pushing me because he's wealthy or because he's connected politically. And the poor person who's in front of him gets pushed aside with their child, and they often need it more, and this person gets in. So that was ironclad, that, first come, first serve. Where were we? Senior moment?
That's funding. Where are you getting funded? Do people pay to come? Are you getting funding?
Now, how could I forget about that? So Shalva started the first decade. There was no funding of any kind from the government. It took them a while to realize that what we were doing was very avant-garde, very new, but it was in their interest to fund it. Today, we have a $20 million budget. 38% of that money comes from government funds, whether that Ministry of Social Welfare for various programs. It's not that they give me money, they're funding services per child. Okay. And then we have another 13-14% of the income that we generate ourselves through the Shalva Cafe and through many, many events that people want to do here in our beautiful facilities. So that accounts for another 13%. The other 49% has to be raised from the private sector. And I've traveled most of the world. I've never been in Australia.
We'd love you to come. We'd love you to be here.
So the bottom line is that it's been a schlep. And now in the world of Corona or COVID, obviously everything is stopped. There's no travel, and it's an extraordinarily difficult. Even the challenges we had have now, of course, as everybody else, become many, many fold.
And if we're going to talk about during COVID, how about the programs? Have you been able to stay open? Are children still able to come?
Initially, the government, after I believe it was in mid-April, closed down all educational programs in Israel, including higher education and certainly including special education. So we were one of everybody, and it was closed for about 6 to 7 weeks. And again, the date slips my mind, I believe early June, we were allowed to open again, but of course under very, very strict government guidelines and capsules, as they call it. And that's what we did. Towards the end of the summer, we had our first cases of COVID in-house. when a child became ill and knocked out 20 people who were in contact with him. We then had a assistant staff person who came down with COVID. And again, that created challenges. So it has been a struggle. September 1st came, we opened at full blast again. And every day is another prayer that, you know, hopefully nobody will come down. Now, we do everything in our power to make sure that that impact will be minimal. Make sure that if a staff is with same staff, children are with the same children, it does not operate the free-for-all that it was before. But it's very, very challenging on all levels. And I'm delighted every day to see children coming and know that parents who had to take care of their kids alone at home for 6 weeks, and as much as we were there for them online, that's never going to take away the burden that a parent with a child with, let us say, autism, that can't sit and keep himself busy, what that means to that family.
Kalman, our time's coming to an end, unfortunately. I could speak to you for hours. I just wanted to say thank you. It's a real pleasure to speak to someone who, just from speaking to you, your enthusiasm and excitement about what you do is just incredible. And I feel like I'm speaking to someone who's really found their purpose in life and is fulfilling that purpose. So I guess I just want to wish you a Shana Tova. I hope you continue to fulfill that purpose. And thank you for giving us your time. It's been very, very inspirational.
Keren, it's delightful to be with you, delightful to be with you all. And I thank you for the opportunity to share. And I wish each and all of us a Shana Tova Metuka, a sweet, good year. And where it used to be my grandmother's wish, and I sort of poo-pooed it, now I say very sincerely, good health. This has become critical.
Amen. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Thanks, Kalman, for your thoughts tonight, but also for the momentous efforts of you, Malky, and the entire Shalva Centre. As you said, Shalva hasn't solved the problems for those living with the disability, but it has started the conversation. It has put it on the agenda. Yes. I had the chance to visit Shalva Centre a couple of years ago and was just blown away by what it offers. Now, Kalman's book, again, is Dreams Never Dreamed. I had a read through it this week. It is well worth the read, and I would encourage everyone to order a copy or, in fact, buy a copy and give it to a friend. Now, next week, we're having a panel discussion, but first we have some homework for you. For those with Netflix, and particularly for those of you in Melbourne under an 8 p.m. curfew, I'd like you all to watch the movie Red Sea Diving Resort. It's about a Mossad operation set up on the Red Sea coast of Sudan in order to smuggle out Jews escaping Ethiopia. Now, my panel next week will be with the author who wrote the book, plus one of the Mossad agents, plus one of the Ethiopians rescued in that operation. He is now a rabbi in Israel. Of course, we'll send you details probably tomorrow. Also, as you all know, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot is approaching very fast. These holidays are going to interrupt the lockdown learning schedule a little bit. So after next weekend, we won't be having a lockdown learning session on a Sunday for about 4 weeks, but we will be having a couple of sessions on 1 or 2 Wednesdays during that month. But as always, we'll keep you posted. Until then, keep washing those hands, stay healthy, watch Red Sea Diving Resort, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you, Keren, and thank you again, Kalman.
Thank you so much.